I'm on the steering committee of the Save America movement. And if you were just watching us, this is a actual redo of a podcast we started, or a Substack Live we started, that got interrupted by some technical issues, unfortunately. So we are back, going to start from the beginning. And today I am here because I was invited by my friends at the Save America movement, Dean Blundell, former Congressman Denver Riggleman, to come on and talk to them about Surgeon General nominee Casey Means' nomination hearing before the Senate Help Committee on Wednesday. Now, I, with my colleague Jessica Malati Rivera, sat down for the Save America movement and broke down the entire hearing, including pregame and postgame. And these guys yesterday had an incredible session of Casey Means' wellness poetry reading. And I never miss a good poetry recital. So I very much enjoyed that take on it too. They invited me to come chat with them about all of these things, both the serious medical lack of qualification that Casey Means has, her bonkers conspiracy theory ideas, as well as her inconsistencies in what she said, and what I consider, and I think probably what Dean and Denver would agree with, are introduction of these conspiracy theories into U.S. policy for the sake of enriching herself and her grifter brother, Callie, who is a senior advisor to Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So without further ado, we're going to just jump right back into it and chat a little bit about the wellness poetry that Denver and Dean were going over yesterday. I'd really love to hear Denver's perspective in particular about how this really ridiculous wellness poetry feeds into this darker, larger issue of conspiracies and cults.
Well, it gave me almost some kind of like, I don't say it's PTSD, but it was like PTS, like post-traumatic Bigfoot syndrome, or disorder because, or cult theory disorder, because when I was reading it with Dean and we started to notice it pretty quickly, it seemed to be a blend of spiritual healing, satanic panic, right? Almost like health medical panic, right? That went through that. And it started to remind me of some of the things that she was doing as, when we had started talking about her, walking nude with women through the woods, right? It sort of sparked me about the sky-clad, sort of the things sky-clad means naked. When the people it's called the Voyagers who believe in the harmonic universes, they go in the woods sky-clad to talk to the trees, but also to talk to the harmonic universes. So when I was reading it, I just almost was like, my goodness, it's always the same people. It's always the same thing. And for somebody like that to be a nominee scares the hell out of me because of all the downstream effects. But again, reading it with Dean was a special, special time, because Dean, does add some flavor to the awesomeness of it. But it was just incredible to read it with Dean. But also, it was fun, but it actually got very serious near the end when we saw the ramifications of what could happen with somebody like that in charge.
Oh, yeah, and it's a great point. It's all fun and games till someone loses an eye, the old cliche, right? You can have fun with how crazy Casey Means is. You can have fun with, her wellness poetry. Let's just call it what it is, satanic wellness poetry. It was called If I Were the Devil, where she went to great detail to tell everybody that everything that's wrong with the world is satanic and of the devil. And if she was the devil, this is what the world would look like. And it went into, and again, jabbing people 73 times if she was the devil with vaccines. And she would make it impossible for anybody to question science and big pharma. And if she were the devil, she would get your kids addicted to toxins and processed foods. It's like, the idea that, and by the way, she had some help writing it from AI, and it's a terrible poem. Wadsworth would have rolled in his grave, by the way, but
Well,
it was so bizarre to people like Denver and myself. And Denver's got a very, very rich history, with conspiracy theorists. He's written a Bigfoot book called Bigfoot is Complicated, and it really kind of leans into the different aspects of believers and ecosystems of believers who believe in conspiracy theories. And she touched every branch of that conspiracy theory tree with this satanic poem. And then we got into something else that Casey Means put out about 4 or 5 years ago, where she was 35. She moved to California and she partook in this exercise. And Ange, I know you've got more details on this, and I'd love for you to kind of ferret those out. Is that she took part in this exercise and she gave everybody she actually posted it on her website, where she sells bunk wellness powders, potions, and lotions. We'll get to that in just a second. And was an 8-step guide on how to manifest a husband by literally running through the forest, talking to trees with your girlfriends naked, and doing it while you're completely 100% blitzed on psychedelics and mushrooms, which she admitted to doing, which is fine. I mean, I've got no issue with psychedelics. I know psychedelic therapy, therapeutic psychedelics. I believe in the ketamine process. I believe for a lot of people it's necessary. I've got no problem with cannabis or cannabinoid therapy, like zero. And so, but this is very different, right? This isn't exploratory. This was this spiritual manifestation that bordered on, the religious cult symptoms that are causing severe issues in America today, whether it be Satan or God, and playing everything that this world has to offer as something that is being destroyed on a daily basis. And if she was the devil, she would do that. She's going to be the next Surgeon General if Trump has anything to do with this. America's top doctors, in charge of 6,000 people. She's never been in charge of anything. She's never been a CEO. She sits on boards of companies. She's never had any intergovernmental or government experience. You're telling me she's going to set the tone with these satanic wellness poetry verses and these, 8-step guides on how to manifest a life partner by talking to trees after you've just done a hero dose of mushrooms? And I think that's the part, like, we had a great laugh about it. But watching you the day before that do 5 hours of very serious, you've got to be fucking kidding me. Really kind of got serious at the end for you, but it got real serious for us at the end too, because this is a cross-sectional, it touches everything that is really making Americans sick, which is not having access to health care, which is alternative treatments, the destruction of Medicaid that funnels people into this desperate wellness program that this case means has business interests in, and we can get to those in just a second. And truthfully, it kind of dawned on us, I think Denver and I at the end, we were reading this poetry, and Denver, I could be wrong, but it dawned on us at the end, it's like, oh my God, this is funny, but we just realized how serious it is if this woman becomes the next Surgeon General of the United States of America, Ange.
So it's really striking to me that both you and Denver noted that at the end of your hilarious wellness poetry recital
it was
yesterday,
really funny. Yeah.
It got very
good.
serious.
Yeah, thank you.
But
Yeah.
that has been my experience through this entire past year.
Mm.
These people are clowns, and they're ridiculous. They are all clowns. I mean, every single person who is installed at the head of an agency within the US government, and I'm not even limiting this to HHS, but that's what I know best, certainly.
Sure.
Every single major agency that is responsible for our healthcare, for our health, for our scientific work, for our responses to medical emergencies, everything in the US entire health portfolio is being run by people who are complete clowns. And it's funny to laugh at them because they do ridiculous stuff and none of it's evidence-based and it's easily disprovable. And it's ridiculous, like going out on a psilocybin fueled Vision Quest to find a husband. I mean, this is, sure, feel free to do it. I'm all for freedom. I am a 100% supporter of medical freedom, in fact. However, when you think about it, what are the consequences of this, as you guys both said? Well, the consequences are that they're going to reduce public confidence and public trust in people who have actual expertise. Instead, they're going to give them these alternatives that may or may not be more appealing to people based on the problems that they're having in their own life. Can't find a husband? Take my ayahuasca, tree voyage or whatever. That is not an evidence-based therapy. And when people do stuff like that, look at Scott Adams, the contrarian who wrote the execrable comic strip Dilbert. He tried ivermectin for his prostate cancer, and he died of prostate cancer 2 months ago, telling everybody not to use ivermectin. if people start looking into root cause remedies like that Casey sells and that her brother enables through tax fraud for people to buy, it's not just offensive because she's pulling off a huge grift and enriching herself and her family. It's offensive because literally people are going to die as a result of this.
Well,
She's going to give medical advice that will kill people.
Mhm.
And that to me is not just reprehensible, like that is actually a crime. I think that is a crime. And once this is all over, whenever that happens, however that happens, people like Casey Means need to actually be held accountable for the lack of trust. And this is not limited to the US. You know, you said this is affecting the health of Americans. Why do you think we had more measles cases in Canada than the US had? Why do you think Mexico had more measles cases than either Canada or the US? It's because this has been going on for a long time, undermining trust and confidence in evidence-based medicine in favor of this woo-woo bullshit that people profit from. The net result is that people die from it.
You know, and if we could just kind of rip back to Scott Adams for a second, I'm so glad you said that and you brought it up, and you're 100% right, obviously, because you're a doctor, and I'm just agreeing with you because you have the greatest education of the three of us here on this panel. But it's also, you know, you're fact-based, evidence-based, all of it, right? The Dilbert creator, Scott Adams, who came out of the gate hot against COVID, if you remember that, and then, you know, he really kind of cashed his chips in, you know, it became part of that, you know, hey, I'm racist and I don't like science now, and a lot of things that you didn't know about. Scott Adams became the fore, right? Well, he gets diagnosed with, I believe it's pancreatic cancer, if I'm not mistaken, prostate cancer, a couple of years ago. And the interesting part and the connection back to who might be the next Surgeon General of the United States of America, Casey Means, is a doctor, a fake doctor named William Mackis. William Mackis lives in Canada. William Mackis has been stripped of his license to practice medicine. William Mackis, what he does is he operates a very similar woo-woo, naturopathic medicine adjacent cure for cancer, that he travels around the world and gets people to pay him tens, sometimes hundreds of desperate people dying, like Scott Adams, who utilized William Mackis's services. He later then realized not only did none of it work, I've been living a lie and I'm going to die. I just want to tell everybody William Mackis did nothing to help me, and that's bullshit. And I'm dying still. And William Mackis is a huge supporter of Casey Means. You know, so you want to talk about the deaths that are happening, Dan, and maybe, you know, we're already seeing it, and we're seeing it in very well-known cases when it comes to the destruction of a belief system that has sustained us and led to mortality rates that we never thought were possible over the past 300, 400, 500 years of vaccinology. And of course, you know, just in terms of fact-based medicine. And people are willingly turning their backs on it because, you know, the government and MAGA and MAHA continue to insert those question marks, which undermine what we all know to be true, factual, and fact-based.
You know, I always say stupidity is terminal, right? But its stupidity is also cumulative. And it's something that we had to learn in military mission planning, where one bad decision or one stupid decision has this cascading effect downstream. And the question that, you know, when we were starting this before that I wanted to ask you, Angie, and Dean, is when is there a time where we hold those accountable for those downstream effects at positions of power when you're bringing in things that are not even necessarily false, but they're provably false, where you're well beyond opinion, where you have to have medical doctors making these decisions. And you said something, Angie, about everybody at the top of this rung, this leadership rung in the Trump administration. I used to think, and I'm not trying to tell people, you know, that I'm wrong a whole lot, but I used to think that it was performative belief cosplay. And now looking downstream, I think a lot of these people just truly are believers in so many ways. However, they've also learned how to mine the ignorant across the United States and to metastasize that type of mining to other grifters. And everybody is seeing how great this is. The US government is simply an income generator for nuts. And that's really where we're at right now. And I think there's got to come a time, and I don't know if it'll ever happen because we're still dealing with J6, right? And we're still dealing with the downstream effects of us not being able to take care of that when we should have ripped that cancer out of the United States government system. How do we rip the cancer out of what's happening now and the children, people, adults, the Scott Adams, who it's really hard to have grace for Scott Adams, right? But at
Agreed.
the end, he's like, this sucks. And because they're idiots and I'm an idiot. How do we stop that idiot train? And how do we stop the sort of the terminal issues with stupidity? And I used to think that something like this or facts-based individuals could help, but I feel like the momentum of this type of conspiracy belief is going to be very difficult to stop even now after Trump is gone.
I completely agree with that, Denver. And this is basically the only thing I think about anymore, because I will not have a profession. We will not have science and health and medicine, essentially, if this continues. And so to me, like that question, like how do we rip that cancer out? How do we eliminate this destructive force? Is what I think about all the time. And spoiler alert, I don't know the answer. But what I do think is that we've been science and evidence-based science communication has been losing the communication battle for a long time. I think about this a lot in terms of the lab leak and the origins of the pandemic stuff that we've discussed. We can say, me and my co-authors have written papers, peer-reviewed papers, showing that the evidence is consistent with emergence from the wildlife market of the pandemic. It doesn't matter to the lab leak people. I can get up here too, and I'm a pretty effective science communicator. I can say, we have all this evidence listed out, and I can do it in a pretty engaging way. But how do I compete with some crazy person who already has an audience that is groomed to believe whatever they say, saying, now is a lab leak, China did it, Fauci helped. That's a much more compelling narrative, I think, for a lot of people. And so we're losing really the storytelling battle. But the challenge is the reason the other side can tell such good stories is that they don't have a problem with making shit up. And on our side, we have integrity, we have professional integrity, and we're not going to make things up. And we're going to continue using the scientific method, and we're going to continue to rely on evidence. What we need to do is find a way to communicate this to people where we are engaging people like, this is the way that we should be doing things. This is the way that we've been doing things. And this is what got us to be really the world leader in biomedical research, and not in healthcare systems, but the US was the model for public health responses, for running an overall public health system, for running scientific research. The international research community is completely screwed because of what's happening to NIH, because it didn't only fund research in the US. So we are in real trouble where actually these institutions that have done all of this great work and have been built up over decades are being completely undermined by these quacks, and we are not effectively able to tell people how bad this is. And so what I think about more and more is, how can I change my communication tactics so that I'm not compromising my commitment to my scientific integrity and telling the truth to people, but also engaging them, like really helping people understand, like, we are so screwed, you guys. This is not just like a political debate. This is actually going to kill millions of people, and it's going to completely destabilize our country in terms of national security, standing on the world stage. It's going to devastate our economy. It's going to devastate the global economy. People will not understand what the consequences are of what's happening now until it happens, and that's not necessarily going to occur immediately. So the real challenge I see is to make peer-reviewed research and advisory policy committee meetings and things like that exciting for people, so that they actually will engage with it and understand what the consequences will be. So maybe we could do something about it before even more kids start dying as a result.
Den?
Yeah. I think the United States has a unique characteristic, and I got to be really careful here. So, oh goodness. I think there's a unique characteristic where it's very difficult to win an argument that said that God has actually injected something into my frontal lobe to tell me that your facts are wrong. The unique characteristic of the United States is our religious belief systems. And the fact is, where I came from, being raised Mormon, right, is that there is a big belief in homeopathy and natural spiritualistic cures, or the laying on of hands, or the use of anointment oil, right? All the things that I still talk to people about today, where if you're sick, it's the laying on of hands that heals. I had an individual come up to me and he goes, he goes, God will tell me how to cure myself. I have a direct relationship with God. So why would I go to anybody else? I said, well, God is all knowing, right? As far as you're concerned, because of course he is. I said, so didn't God make doctors then? Maybe, maybe God made the doctors for you. Maybe you were put in a specific niche because didn't you choose beforehand what you were going to be in the pre-life? Isn't that part of your belief system? And that just sort of, right now they're like, oh, this guy knows religion. Oh shit, right? So my thing is this, is that it's very difficult in the United States. And Angie, I think, and Dean, I think this is the thing that I have to be so careful of from where I came from. But if everybody already believes that there's a direct line to the supernatural, how can we make facts and data part of their baseline decision tree rather than whatever relationship they have to whatever sky thing or whatever thing is in their soul is telling them, or the people that they believe are conduits to that? And now people are like, oh my God, Denver, you're starting to walk on this ground where you're telling us in the United States that maybe belief and non-critical thinking is consuming the people that are trying to live on the rational and sane wavelength. That is sort of exactly what I'm saying. And I feel like it's getting worse. And I don't, I really thought that this house to house way of going person to person, or the fact that you're writing books, or the fact that we're doing what we're trying to do, there's a reason I'm here with Dean, Angie. Like I would go out every now and then after my 3 years when I wrote the book, The Breach, about January 6th, when I tried to warn people about what's happening today 3 years ago. And I got to the point, I'm like, is it worth my time?
Mm.
And I think it is now again, because I feel like there's a smaller and smaller fraction of people that are, sort of screaming into the void. Maybe if there's enough of us, people can hear us. But I think it's only going to be sort of this massive cascading effect of death and discomfort, I think, is the only way to get out of this. And I don't want it to get there. But even with the last story, and I'll end here and you guys can help me. The last story of the lady whose son or daughter was dying of measles and said she still wouldn't have gotten him the vaccination. And I don't know how to get through on that wavelength. And I thought I could, but I guess the humility part of it and the naive part for me is that maybe that's going to be very difficult to almost impossible for a large majority of those type of individuals.
I agree with that, Denver. And I've struggled with many of the same things, because what I really feel that we are currently facing is a battle for how the public understands reality. And that is a very difficult thing, to try to convince somebody to change their entire view of what's real and what's not. And so there have been a number of my colleagues and people who are in the science communication space who have started these efforts to really talk to like MAHA people and get their point of view. And I actually think this is the worst way possible to try to engage this.
So glad
The
you said
problem
that.
Yeah,
is
I'm
not-
glad you went that way with it too, because I think it's a point.
Yeah, I was
The
like, what?
Yeah, the problem is not that we need to convince people to change their minds who've drank the Kool-Aid already. We need to change the people who are fucking lying to get them to drink the Kool-Aid. We need to remove those people. We need to remove the people who are controlling what the public sees as reality. And so to do that, I think that's actually a much easier thing to do. I can attack RFK Jr. and I can try to do it in an entertaining and engaging way. And if enough of this keep trying, we're all pretty smart and pretty effective, and we all have our own areas of expertise. And I think as a community, and this is one of the things I really like about the Save America movement, is that it's trying to get a bunch of people who are citizens. It doesn't matter what political party you are. It doesn't really matter what, your background is or any of that. We're all bringing what we can offer to the table to fight back against this. And I think that the most effective way of fighting back against this particular thing is to get these clowns exposed for what they are, expose them for the profiteers that they are. And I do think that even the people who have these wacky beliefs. At the end of the day, if they find out that these people are stealing billions of dollars of taxpayer money
That's what they're
for
doing.
the purpose of undermining democracy and everything we've ever valued about America. And like, so I live in Canada now, but I'm from the Seattle area, and I didn't move to Canada until 2021. I spent the vast majority of my life in the US. I grew up in the 80s. I have a lot of American pride. I have like 80s Cold War American pride. And I think that we should get back to that, because it's unimaginable to like 10-year-old, 12-year-old me, before the Soviet Union fell apart, that we would ever have Americans advocating for basically Russian Soviet values, Stalinist values in this country. And to me, we can reach people if we get the people who are convincing the public that this is a good idea and that this is actually making America great again, when it's really fascism.
I'm telling you, Dean, I
Crushed
don't
it.
yeah, I
You know,
yeah,
but go ahead, Ben. Go ahead. You because you got a heart.
no,
out here.
no, Dean,
Yeah.
go ahead, my friend. No,
No,
go ahead, buddy.
No, you go. No, you go.
No,
And
you
you
go,
go.
Dean.
I'll go.
No,
You go, Denver.
hey,
Okay.
no,
Yeah,
okay, I'll go.
You go.
Okay. So here's the thing. Angie, I'm still in the US, right? I'm here in I got my whiskey distillery here in Virginia. We got them in the Poconos. I have AI companies. I have all this stuff going on. I almost feel like, I'm doing all kinds of business stuff around the country, around the world, UAE, also Canada, here in the US. And I'm almost to a point, I'm thinking, I want to stay and fight. I have grandkids, I have kids. How do I get everybody to where they're safe? I've had so many death threats, one attempt on me. I've had so many things happen that if I sat down with both of you over a bourbon, you'd be like, Jesus, And I'm sure you guys have had some of these same experiences. But I think there's going to come a time where I got to make a choice. Like, am I going to just stay and just fight to the end? And I think I'm almost to a point, where I almost want, my kids and grandkids to live in, Canada, and I'll just stay here, and just go to the end, right? But I guess I've lost hope, that individuals will come out of this fog by themselves. So I'm going to give one last big run down the lane to see if I can make something happen with good people like yourselves. I think that's the only thing I can do. I don't know what else to do except to expose what I know based on the data analytics and the facts-based things that I've done in my life, and to hang out with folks like you and see if we can get it across. But I don't think it's going to be possible, Angie, for me, you, and Dean to reach some of the individuals we want to reach.
Mm.
And I think that's part of it too, is that, are we screaming into a popcorn box? Now I'm being very personal with both of you right now.
Yeah.
Are we just screaming into a popcorn box and getting the echo back to us? And if that's the case, we're not being very effective. But I think if you start to apply business practices and communication practices to this, and Dean, I'm going to give you a shout out. Dean was talking about, maybe we can get our messaging right for some other things we're doing. But I think what Dean is talking about, and Angie, what you're doing in Save America, is, can we get the messaging to break through to that 3 to 5%, which is all we need? Can we get that messaging to break through? And maybe there's a chance here. After everything I just said, I still can't shake the optimism that a majority of that small percentage in the middle that can go either way, which is getting smaller and smaller, that we can't bring them out of that crazy. So that's, I know I had, I know you guys will keep going, but I just wanted to tell you both that's where I'm at.
Dude, well said. And before you go, I think just to kind of co-sign your point, and that point being, how is it going to be possible to reach the masses of the confused, right? And introducing the concept of a sky daddy, introducing the concept of a religion and several different types of religions and spiritual religions that tie themselves back to eternal salvation, a blood oath that you make, and the abusement of those people by this regime. I mean, they've tapped into something that these people will die for. They're going to die for alternative awareness, right? They're going to die for, they would rather die and than upset their chances at making it to the afterlife. They would rather die than experience eternal salvation than, give in to big pharma, which is satanic. And this regime has done an incredible job of wrapping religion, wrapping people's ideologies and belief systems into another spiritual, sort of a group, if you want to call them a group, of, the people that we used to kind of mock and talk about as flat earthers, and people that wore a lot of patchouli, and people that, the urine therapy crowd. Like they've managed to bridge all of those gaps. Now these people, what's more
Wasn't
important
Donald Trump in the urine therapy
I
crowd?
think he might be. Yeah, yeah. We have to ask the steel
Oh,
dust.
sorry.
She was trying to get better in Russia. But I think you have to really look at that and not discount it as one of the biggest reasons why this whole movement has been effectively bulletproof to facts, right? Because they don't want them. They don't want them. Their facts are spiritual. Their facts are attached to an ideology where they've given their entire life, soul, heart, and being to a religion, operating system, or ideology. Because the other side of that means they're wrong. And I don't know if, like, coming from an evangelical Christian background, that's a fate worse than death for Christians. They stay
Sure
away, a
is.
lot of those hardcore evangelicals, they'll stay away from fact-based science because their church groups, their leaders, their elders tell them that it's wrong, it's a lie. Science is a lie. The earth is only 7,000 years old. We've had, you and I have had this conversation many times. You and I both we're apostate, if you will, both come from religious backgrounds. So it's really, really easy for us to be able to kind of pick the rotten fruit off that tree and show it to people and go, hey, this is what you're dealing with. But what they don't account for, and what we don't account for, is the way that they think. The way that they think is not based in critical thought process, or self-awareness. It is, I'm going to pray this cancer away. I'm going to pray COVID away. I'm going to pray whatever disease I have away. And if it doesn't work, they rely on two words, and I find it fascinating. Those two words are God's will. It was
God's
God's
will.
will that I died. It was God's will that I wasn't cured of cancer and that I'm going to pass away. It is God's will that that car accident happened. So that's what we're up against. And unless people truly understand that and stop trying to go and, to convince or somehow evolve that group into critical thinking. And as Denver said, we've talked about this, really focus on that middle ground of people that don't have that fealty but are trying something new, that feel like they're just taken advantage of by corrupt pharma and big government, those people that haven't given their minds away to a cult, or that haven't given their minds away to the bullshit that we're talking about. Those are the people that we have to focus on. And to Denver's point, there is a huge opportunity there right now. And aggregating these voices and pushing them at those people in a way that helps them understand that this is not science-based. This is magic bullshit that is absolutely the reason you have a fascist government and a president of the United States that executes his own people. Unless people understand that, it's pissing into the wind, if you will, to your points. All right.
Yeah. And then, and Angie, I'm going to throw it back to you because I know, and literally, I hate that I have a tech meeting right now. But here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. It's hard for me to have grace for a parent who chooses for their child to die as a pureblood rather than get the measles vaccination. And I think that's what I'm trying to find is, how do I get to those people, or how do I have grace for that? It's just very difficult. And that's just something that I'm fighting with. But I think, on the other hand, being here is just really fortunate to be with, you two, and being able to go back and be talking about, as we were in the break, right, Angie, about cognitive dissonance in 1957, and Dr. Leon, was it Friesinger? I'm trying to remember what his name was, when he was looking at the UFO believers who thought they were going to be taken up, and then they said they prayed the UFO away,
Yeah.
which is exactly what Dean said about praying the sick away. It's the same thing. So that's why it's just so exciting to be here. And I really appreciate that you guys let me do this for a while.
Thanks for doing it, dude.
Thanks for inviting me, because like you're thanking me and I like just completely took over hosting this when I was actually the invited guest. But this is wonderful, Denver. And you know what? This kind of thing does give me hope, because you guys are right that like the three of us alone are not going to change this. But I think that there are so many different groups in that middle ground that we can speak to. And we really need everybody who can speak to all these different perspectives, because people are coming from different places. Some of them are going to have these religious beliefs. Some of them are going to have other beliefs. And we need to have all the people who can really communicate with them in a trusted way, who they already trust. And sometimes that's going to be me or you or Dean, and sometimes that's going to be somebody else. So I do have hope, because I do think that increasingly people are starting to recognize this. I don't know about you, Denver, but I have sometimes felt completely crazy, like reading some of this stuff because it is crazy. And then it's like, why does nobody else appreciate how crazy this is? And maybe I'm the crazy one who doesn't appreciate that this is actually normal. But I don't think so. I think that crazy stuff is becoming increasingly normalized, and having a group of people who can point that out effectively to a lot of different people who might be subject to it is really going to be key for us going forward. So I couldn't be more
That's our
grateful,
own.
Denver. I look forward to the next
Yep.
time we talk.
Oh my gosh, you guys are going to continue, but it is nice to be part of a coalition of the sane. I
Yeah.
can tell you that right now. So
Hey, we're finding
great.
each other. It's great.
We're
See you,
finding
Den.
each other. So I'm so sorry I got to go. I'm
No,
so sorry.
You get out of here.
See you
We'll talk
guys.
to you soon.
Go,
See you later.
Denver.
Denver
See you.
Riggleman,
See ya.
Bye-bye.
former congressman, CEO, all around good guy, apostate who has his finger on the pulse. He was also on the January 6th committee. And tomorrow we're going to be reading some January 6th texts. I would encourage everybody to join us. Wait till you see where the crazy comes from, to your point. And Ange, thank you for having me. Thank you for hosting me in these Save America Movement studios. I couldn't be more grateful to be involved with you, to be involved in this fight with you, to stand side by side with someone like you. A lot of people don't know this, but Ange and I are pals, and I have followed her for a very long time. And she needs to be in everybody's life. So please give Angie, Dr. Angela Rasmussen. Rasmussen Retorts is where you're going to find her on Substack. You can find Dr. Angela Rasmussen on Twitter as well. Anywhere, please give her a follow. Not only is she absolutely deadly funny, she's also incredibly right. And she will save your life if you let her. So make sure you get involved in Dr. Angela Rasmussen's life. And I want to thank everybody for joining us, Ange. Thank you so much for making time and space for us today.
Anytime, Dean. Well, thank you, I guess, since I'm like now the host of this.
Yes.
But I'll always make time for you, Dean. I mean, ever since like we've met in person, because we've both followed each other for a long time, like it's just, I feel like we hit it off and we're really on the same page about a lot of this stuff. And like you were saying, or Denver was saying, a coalition of the sane, I think is what we all really need right now. And so I'm super grateful that we met and became pals, and we are part of this coalition of the sane. And we should do this more often. We were doing this more often, and then we kind of dropped off, and we both got busy and stuff.
Yeah,
So
I
we
had to
should
go to
pick it back up.
Denmark, and then
Yeah.
that started a big like Denmark versus Norway thing because you're Norwegian, and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm not talking to you because you went to Denmark. I'm from Norway. No.
I did no such thing, because I've actually had to really watch my like inherent, grandfather provided anti-Danish bigotry. Just because as an American, I find it incredibly offensive what our country is doing to Denmark. And
Yes.
Denmark is our valuable ally, despite the fact that it's a nation of Norwegians with their brains kicked in, according to my grandfather. That's not true. I know that there are many wonderful, smart Danish people. And one thing that, we might want to table for the future, should the Denmark thing ever come back up, is there's been quite a lot of public health misinformation related to Denmark as well.
yeah.
And there's this $1.6 million unreviewed grant awarded to Danish researchers to do a study of the HBV, the hepatitis B vaccine birth dose in Guinea-Bissau, which is one of the poorest countries in the world in West Africa, and has one of the highest child mortality rates, and also has 1 in 5 people infected with hepatitis B virus. So it would be putting basically babies in Africa at risk of contracting a disease that will affect them for their entire life and give them cancer and kill them. And the reason that they gave this to this group in Denmark is that basically they want to pay for a study that will give them results that will support descheduling the HBV birth dose, but it will be at the expense of the lives of African babies. So the US is sending $1.6 million. By the way, that was matched by Bill Ackman at Pershing Square. So terrific, like short seller billionaire. Very bad ideas, very pro MAHA guy. But they're basically funding these studies with US taxpayer money, without any kind of scientific review for its merit. And they're giving this money to like these Danish people who are contributing to all of these, wild vaccine ideas.
Maybe what we'll do is place a call to my friends in Denmark and get that stopped. Anyway.
We
Appreciate you
should,
doing
because
this.
yeah, RFK is also attacking Danish guys, but well, this is a whole conversation for another time.
We're going to
Anyways,
pick it up
Dean,
again. You and I are going to do one of these a little less formal next week, and we'll get our health talk back on.
sounds
How's that sound?
perfect. Love
Thanks,
it.
Ange.
Bye, Dean.
Bye, guys.
Thanks everybody for coming.